if you were to judge yourself in respect to other people for the purposes of improving yourself, naturally you would judge yourself, or at least seemingly you would judge yourself with those who are greater than you, that you look up to, so you could become greater. That would naturally be our intuition, or at least mine. But if it is to subjugate or to subdue or to deal with the negativity that we have from within, that we want to silence the negativity of the animal soul that is dulling our heart and not allowing us to feel the love, the connection to the divine, to feel that, extra step in life that we hop, skip, and a jump, rather than maybe the ball and chain that we might feel at times. Then we need to compare ourselves to those that are less than ourselves and see them greater than us. So if we're waging this war within us because, you're feeling weighted, you're not in complete control with your divine soul, but your animal soul is in control. So when we recognize that the kal shebekalim, which means the simpleton of simpleton, the one who works in the market, whose eyes go in the public domain, where shouldn't go because of the heart's desire, and who has a temperament that is fiery, both in a negative sense and in a negative sense, let's say. That person has to wage such a strenuous war in order to overcome that nature of theirs, in order to do the right thing. Strenuous fight, battle. Just imagine, you're working on the street. You work in a hot climate place where 12 months a year people are dressed immodestly, and you sell your wares publicly outdoors. What a struggle that would be for a man in such a situation, especially if that person by nature is drawn by the flesh. What a battle that person has to engage in order to keep their eyes where they should be. When we think and compare ourselves to that person, the strenuous battle that they need, then the Beinoni, or us, Beinoni in training, will humble the evil impulse in us when it comes to positive things, right? That's not our struggle, let's say. The Beinoni, that's not the struggle of the Beinoni. Struggle of the Beinoni will come in prayer, or come in like a simple thing, grace after meals, birchas hamazon, benching. or a simple blessing that can be easily said out of rote, without deliberateness, mindfulness. Imagine how deliberate and mindful that street vendor has to be not to look where he shouldn't look. That's a powerful battle. Is the Beinoni, when it comes to making a blessing, that deliberate, that mindful. Or when doing a mitzvah, doing it solely for the sake of connecting to Hashem. That's a great effort. Person needs to engage in that. Or while studying Torah, as we are doing now. Is the Torah that's being studied just following what we're accustomed to? We just put in, you come to Rabbi Fine every day because that became part of the program. Or is the studying now going beyond that? Exertion is the point over here. The exertion that's being put in. That's the question of the Beinoni comparing himself to the lesser person. The exertion that street corner guy needs to put in. Am I exerting myself in my area of life? Am I struggling in that manner as the Kal Shebekalim needs to? And even if the Kal Shebekalim, that street vendor, comes up short, that's vis-a-vis the Beinoni looking and comparing. That's what his struggle is. That's what he needs to overcome, because that's the position in life where he is physically and emotionally and psychologically and spiritually. So that's where I am, or the Beinoni says to himself, and what I need to overcome in my area in life. Can I really compare myself to that of the Kal Shebekalim and what they? Now you might say, well, how could you compare? He's struggling with real negativity. I'm struggling with just doing more good. To making sure that the blessing is said with intentionality. To making sure that I'm learning and exerting myself. And not just learning the day's lesson, but adding more and more focus. That I'm not focused on the coffee, I'm focused on the teachings. I'm not focused or thinking about when will it be over, so I will then engage in other things, but I'm totally exerting myself and focusing. And that's all positive. How can I, I'm way beyond, so what, am I looking myself less than that person? The answer is yes. Because from God's perspective, there's no difference between doing good or doing bad. Ultimately, everybody is where they're at, and wherever it is, whatever you struggle with, whatever you're dealing with, a positive commandment, a negative commandment, before God, it's God's will that you deal with it. It's His commandment. Both of them. He commands us the positive, He commands us the negative. So you struggle with kosher, you struggle with Shabbos, you struggle with, here in the example, Kal Shebekalim, the street vendor whose eyes, can be in a place or can go where it shouldn't go. So yes, you can compare. So too when it comes to struggling, waging the war against our negative impulse of the Yetzer Hara, of the evil inclination, of the animal soul, when it comes to money matters? How much do we labor in giving charity? How much am I laboring in giving beyond my comfort zone? Or how much do I do that just what makes me comfortable? Does that take away? The Alter Rebbe is not saying this over here. Excuse me. Does that take away, parenthetically I'm saying now, does that take away from the mitzvah? Absolutely not. You gave whatever amount, minimal amount, comfortable amount, doesn't take away from the mitzvah in the fact that you did a mitzvah. And that's not the point here. The point over here is the Beinani is working, they're working on themselves in order to illuminate the soul, the heart that is dull, and therefore comparing themselves to those that are less than themselves and feeling that those that are less than themselves are greater than them. How? In the struggle. In order to struggle and wage that war against the negativity from within, to subdue it, subjugate it, and not let it have its dominion, so the soul could shine. Just remember our what the goal is over here, not to get confused, because it's very easy to get confused. So our laboring in charity, exerting oneself, in the way, the battle that the Kal Shebekalim, that street vendor, needs to? Am I doing that when it comes to charity? Or, for example, can I stop in the middle of a pleasant gossip? Perhaps in a very non-overt manner, discrediting another individual. A slight slur, not a real one. As related in the Talmud, Rab Shimon said to his father, who was Rabbeinu HaKadosh, the author of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda the Nasi, concerning a problematic bill of divorce that was improperly written. So he responded to his father, his father thinking that he wrote it. He says, I didn't write it. Yehuda the tailor wrote it. Which, what was that? A slur against Yehuda the tailor. Why was he saying that? To exonerate himself. But by exonerating himself, he vindicated someone else. And his father's replied to him, keep away from slander. Right? It's not such a simple slander, because the father wanted to know. But, not definitely not like, giving it to somebody, right? In any case, the point is to exert yourself when it comes to something like that. Especially true, continues the Alter Rebbe, and says, how much exertion do I put into sanctifying myself in those things that are permitted? Like eating breakfast, eating something, of course, kosher for a Jew. That, how much do I indulge in that which is permitted, or am I able to not self-indulge and to sanctify myself, as we learned previously, pushing off a bit the permissible thing in order to do a mitzvah in its stead? How much am I able to do that? How much do I exert myself is the point the Beinani is thinking and meditating upon, in order, again, to overcome the Beinani, overcome their personal negativity from within. And then, of course, when it comes to similar things that are, repeatedly simple things that are stepped upon, that that we don't give mind to, we're not intentional about. So the truth is, the person who upholds Torah, this greater person who wishes only to become close to God, their sins are unbearably greater because they don't wage the war to overcome the natural impulse to follow and live on autopilot, commensurate with their greatness. Their greatness demands greater exertion, greater battling. And therefore, their guilt, here not the word guilty, there is much greater than the Kal Shebekalim, the simpleton, that street vendor that we're talking about, right? Parenthetically, this is perhaps like the difference between the child and the adult. When the child says something, and the adult says the same thing, for the adult, that's really an indiscretion, on that negativity. The child is a child. It's the same thing, the Kal Shebekalim, the battle that they need to engage in. Just to refrain from one negative thought, one glance where you shouldn't glance, to have that negative thought. It's huge. So therefore, the person who is like the adult, the more aware person, the much more engaged, the scholar, person who all they want to do is get close to God, as opposed to that street vendor, right? He just wants to make a living and, enjoy life. The struggle he needs to go through is the Beinoni struggling in that way, is the Beinoni exerting, making the effort in such a manner as our sages say about Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, that he knew God and rebelled against him, so his guilt is far greater than someone else who doesn't know. And as our sages declare, that the illiterate, or like our street vendor over here, that's a way of metaphor we're speaking of, right? Their deliberate sins are considered as inadvertent sins. They don't know better. They don't know better. Where by the scholar, the reverse is true. The oversight due to lack of study or deliberateness, being deliberate, highly intentional, is considered a deliberate sin, even though it was done inadvertently. So therefore, the failure to restrain the negative impulse of the scholar, of the Beinoni, of this greater person, is far worse than the Kal Shebekalim, the simpleton, this so-called street vendor. So when this Beinoni will contemplate this, please don't try this on your own. Only do that with some guidance that we get from TRC, which tonight there's a TRC, by the way, 8 p.m. Those who want more information, contact me, please. So by contemplating this, the Beinoni, this scholar, this great person, will be able to fulfill that which the Mishnah says, which we began the beginning of chapter 30, which we're concluding now. That you should be lowly spirit before every person. Not figuratively, literally. Can't compare this person, the Beinoni, this scholar, compared to that street vendor, the simpleton of simpleton. You can't compare, seemingly. The Alter Rebbe just did. Where he's way down here and he's way up here, the Alter Rebbe switched it. Why? Not based on what your observance is, but where's the effort? Where's the exertion? Where is the avodah, the work being done? How much work is really being done? The exertion that the scholar needs to do, the Beinoni needs to do. And therefore, when we contemplate that, we can be literally see that this person is greater. And why are we doing this? This is a tool to subjugate the negative impulse that we have, or the Beinoni has within them, in order not to allow it to have any control over the heart, where the heart might become dull in its devotion to Hashem. And by thinking this and meditating upon this, allow the Beinoni to rid themselves of that impairment on their level that impairs them and doesn't allow the soul to shine. Through this, allow the soul to shine.